Most people know the Fire Emblem series thanks to the introduction of Marth into the Super Smash Bros. Roster, then Ike, then Robin, then all of them. I'll admit, this is also how I was introduced to the franchise as well. But since then, I've grown to love the series on its own terms, and have played every single Fire Emblem game that has been released in the US. And some that haven't, but shh, that's a secret. So I feel that it means a lot when I say that Fire Emblem Three Houses is probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite, Fire Emblem game that I have ever played.
Oh my, let's see. I suppose I have no choice but to vote for the Golden Deer House. Your performance was exhilarating. My heart is still beating a mile a minute.
If you're unfamiliar, the Fire Emblem series is primarily an RPG strategy game where you build up an army and then use it to gain victory against an enemy army of potato people. Though each game makes some changes in story and gameplay, that's a general synopsis of how the game works. Three Houses, however, does try to mix things up a fair bit, as while the main part of the gameplay is focused on its strategic battles, a lot has been added into the game to make it different when compared to every Fire Emblem title that has come before. Towards the beginning of the game, you're going to choose a gender for your main protagonist, and after a convenient set of circumstances, find yourself teaching at a monastery that acts as a military academy for young students. These students are split into the titular Three Houses: the Black Eagles, the Blue Lions, and the Golden Deer, with each house representing a different part of the country that they belong to. And you, as a new professor, must choose which house you're going to teach. This decision may actually be a difficult one, as which house you choose not only affects which units you are able to obtain, but it will also affect the overall story of the game, so it's definitely one that you must consider carefully, as you're going to be with these characters for some time. Now, I won't go more into the story here, but it really feels different when compared to Fire Emblem games of the past. Most past Fire Emblem titles and characters were fairly black and white. You had your good guys and your bad guys. Both the protagonists and the antagonists in Three Houses, however, are fairly morally gray, with each of their views feeling valid, even if they may be a bit flawed. This is a massive improvement over Fire Emblem Fates, which had a similar idea, where the main protagonist had to choose between two factions, though in that game both factions had the same antagonist when all was said and done. I mean, really, look at this guy. He was gonna be a massive douche no matter what. If you were like me and found characters that you like in every house, don't worry, as most characters can be transferred into your house if they feel like they're going to gain something by doing so. What this means in game terms is that each student has two things that they want the protagonist to be proficient in: a certain stat, and knowledge of a certain weapon or magic type. You can also lower the threshold of what the main character needs to know by utilizing what is known as the support system. This system has been a staple of the Fire Emblem series since 1994. Eat your heart out, Persona. When you have two characters in a battle with an affinity for each other fighting near one another, they will slowly gain points towards their bond. After a certain threshold has been reached, you can have two characters talk to each other when they're back at the monastery, which will reveal more about their backstory and possibly introduce some character development between your units. How this affects gameplay is that when these characters are close to each other after that in battle, they will gain stat bonuses, so encouraging these relationships is ideal. The support system works a little bit differently with the main character though, as they have more options when it comes to gaining affinity with their students and colleagues. This includes inviting them to tea, singing in the monastery choir, and, well, let's just say you've got a lot of options. After a certain point in the story, you can even choose a romantic interest for the main character, some of which are actually same-sex. I'll just save the rant that I have for this particular subject, but long story short, there are a fair amount of female options, go Leslie Pride, but despite the game giving you multiple male options, only one of them is actually romantic in nature. I'm not going to go into more detail about that here, but if you want to know the full extent of this, or would like to hear my thoughts on the subject, I'll possibly do a video about that in the future. But despite this being a major disappointment for homosexual males, it's not a huge detractor from the game itself.
Professor, you're late. To tell the truth, it was an act of sheer hope that I might find you here. I'm glad to find I was right. I hope to find you, so I might ask... Well, I would very much like to research your crest.
Oh my.
Another unique aspect of the game is its use of the calendar. During times when you aren't teaching your students, you'll have free activities. These times can be spent roaming the monastery and indulging in all the different activities it has available. As you wander, you will run into all the teachers and students present, and you can give them gifts or invite them to many of the aforementioned activities. You can also teach or go to seminars that will teach particular skills to all teachers and students who attend the lectures. Finally, you can go on side missions and paralogs, with side missions acting as a way to grind levels if you would like to, and paralogs being additional side stories that will give you more information about the characters involved. In previous games, there has been an aspect that is known as the weapon triangle, where 3 of the primary weapons in the game work against each other in a rock, paper, scissors fashion. The way this normally works is swords are more effective against axes, which are more effective against spears, which in turn are more effective against swords. There have always been modifications and additions to this system as time has gone on, but that was always the core of the triangle. In 3 Houses, however, this system has been completely removed, which at first may seem like the game dumbing itself down, but based off of what I've seen, it was most likely changed in order to prevent players from putting themselves into a corner by not having enough units proficient with certain weapons. The reason that players can do this is because the game has also opened the player's ability to customize their army more than any game in the past. As when you first get your units, they're essentially blank slates, and you can have them focus on any aspect of battle that you would like them to. Though each character is going to be naturally more adept at certain areas than others. This means that generally you will have a good idea of what you may want to train them in if you don't actually have a preference. The only real negative I found in battles in this game were that the maps felt somewhat lackluster, with a lot of them looking nearly identical to each other. They also tended to lack objectives other than defeat all enemy units. This is a shame, since different objective types in past games generally made each chapter feel unique, as your overall goal could differ tremendously from one map to the next. Visually, I think the game looks great, though the anime style may not be for everyone. For the most part, the game didn't seem to suffer from any technical issues, minus the occasional NPC acting wonky at the monastery, or the game suffering from frame rate chugging. The latter was a minor issue and only seemed to happen whenever exploring the monastery. Sometimes loading can be a bit on the longer side, but these load times were generally reserved for larger maps with many different types of enemies, and wasn't really something that had to be dealt with every time something needed to load. Besides, at the very least, you could always make your sprite jump while waiting. The music and audio design were well done, and honestly, I think they may have overdone it. Every single line of dialogue in this game is voice acted. Even throwaway lines like tutorials. That's an amazing effort to have to go through, considering that who even tells you the tutorials changes depending on your house. They really pulled no punches in this department. The audio also has quite a few memorable tracks, particularly the main theme and some of the later chapter themes. If you own the Switch, I definitely think that this is a must-buy. And for those who are still on the edge of purchasing a Switch, this may be another game to add to your reasons to own one. I've only completed one storyline so far, and that ran me about 70 plus hours to complete. With that in mind, there are still 3 other storylines to go through. So with just the base game, that's a lot of bang for your buck. If you're a Fire Emblem fan, a strategy fan, an RPG fan, or just a Switch owner, I think that this is a great game for your collection, and one that I personally am eager to sink even more hours into in the foreseeable future. Hi, thank you for watching my review of 3 Houses. If you liked it, let me know in the comments below. If you didn't like my review, also let me know in the comments below. I always like to hear constructive criticism on what I could do to make my content better. And if you'd like to possibly see my videos more often, feel free to subscribe to me. I won't say no. Along with reviews, I've also been working on lore videos and retrospectives, which I try to get up on a pretty regular basis. And with that, I thank y'all all for watching, and I'll see you next time.